Hello, Sal here from SJ Cooks. Today, I'm smoking up a brisket on my newly acquired 26-inch Weber kettle. It'll be my first low and slow cook on this 26-inch Weber, and what better protein and what better method to test out its low and slow capabilities than smoking up a brisket. Now this brisket is gonna go unwrapped and I'm gonna be resting it for about 12 hours. Now why 12 hours? Why am I resting it for this long? What are the advantages? I'll answer all of those questions. But before we do that, I'm gonna have to actually cook up a brisket. I have this 16-pound prime brisket I picked up at Costco. Now what kind of trimming did I do? Well, for me, I do the best I can to remove any big chunks of fat. I'm also gonna shave down the fat cap just a little if it's too thick. I also like to round off the corners. Now this might look like a waste shaving off some of the meat like this, but not doing it will result in these edges and corners drying up on you. Shaving off the corners and edges will yield a better result at the end. Keep in mind, the trimmed off fat can be melted down for some tallow, and the shaved bits of meat you do can be grounded up into burgers. For me and most backyard cooks, this trim is good enough. I'm shying away from my normal salt and pepper seasoning, and instead I'm laying down my favorite all-purpose rub, the good old It's Incredible by Heaven Made Products. Now I've been a fan of this rub longer than I've been producing content, and it's my go-to for everything. But it's been a while since I used it on some brisket. Now once I put down a layer on all-purpose rub, I'll add some additional pepper because, well, pepper rocks. Now if you don't have It's Incredible seasoning and you wish to keep things simple, do a 1-to-1 kosher salt to pepper mix. But if you want to make your own all-purpose rub, go with a salt-pepper-garlic ratio of 2-1-1. That's 2 parts salt, 1 part pepper, and 1 part garlic. Now whatever seasoning you use, be sure to coat evenly, top to bottom and on the sides. Now since I did my trimming and seasoning the day before, I'll wrap this up in some plastic and put it in the fridge. The next day, we'll want to prep up our grill. I'm using my 26-inch Weber kettle, and I'm using the SNS insert. I'm lighting up about 12 briquettes directly on the SNS insert using 2 Weber starter cubes. And I'm going to stack up the briskets as close to the fire to get them all started. I'm also pouring in some hot water into the water trough. The water helps regulate temperature and it'll add moisture to the cooker. Smoke is also said to adhere to the meat a lot better this way, but really I haven't done any tests for myself to prove this, but if anyone has any insight, let me know it down in the comments. Now once the briquettes are lit, I'll drop in some cherry wood chunks, and then I'll fill up the rest of the SNS insert with charcoal. Now this is going to be my first low and slow cook on this 26-inch kettle, so I have no idea how long this charcoal will last, but let's find out today. Let's place in our brisket that was already seasoned. I am so impressed with how much space I get on the 26-inch Weber kettle. Now if you want something to compare it to, this is the same brisket placed on my 22-inch Weber kettle. Although it does fit, it's a little tight. Plus I was a little aggressive with the trim. Now if you want to gain more space, then you could also use the Weber baskets instead of the SNS insert, but the problem with the baskets is you'll need to refill the charcoal a few times. Like with any other cooker, I like to use my thermometer to keep track of temperatures. I've also put the probe wires through the portholes instead of going under the lid to help keep a tighter seal. I'm starting with the top vent completely open, well almost, and the bottom vent sent to a quarter open. Let's monitor temperatures in the next few hours and try to keep it around 250 degrees. 5 hours later, let's do a quick check. It really looks good so far. The temperature held out really well with my settings. It did to a low 215 around the 2-hour mark, but I opened up the bottom vent just a bit and it got back to the 250 range. Now I will admit, I did a little bit more tinkering with the vents that I'm used to, but that's just what happens sometimes when you're dealing with live fire cooking. These cookers aren't ovens, so it's going to require you to make minor adjustment as the cook goes on. I think with enough experience and enough cooks, I'll have the vent settings dialed in, and I could go leaving the kettle unmonitored for a longer time. Now normally I would be wrapping the brisket at this point, But I went on a live and our good friend Quint Nelson suggested that I go unwrapped. And that's exactly what I'm gonna do, or not do. If you're interested in this type of interaction while I'm cooking and making a video, be sure to turn on your notifications so you can be alerted when I'm live, and I would gladly take any advice and suggestions from the chat. Now it's been a total of 12 hours of cooking time, so I think it's time to probe it and check for tenderness. Although my probes are telling me I'm hitting about 189 and 195, my instant read is reading a little higher. But more importantly than temperature at this time is tenderness. Both the flat and the point are probing tender, so I'm going to call this one done. Now confession time. I had a little bit of drinks during this cook, so my filming got a little bit sloppy. But I had planned to rest this brisket overnight, so there was no pressure of people waiting around for this brisket to be done. I also didn't have to refill the SNS insert with more charcoal, which is another big plus. This bark looks beautiful, so a big thank you to Quint Nelson for the suggestion to go unwrapped. As mentioned, we weren't going to eat this brisket tonight, so I really didn't care how long it took. Now, if you have the time, going unwrapped and developing that bark is totally worth it. But if you want to decrease the cooking time, definitely wrap. Let's remove and get ready for the rest. I'm going to do a sous vide overnight rest for this brisket. I'm going to wrap the brisket with butcher paper before vacuum sealing. I haven't seen anyone do this, but my thinking is that hopefully it'll help hold the bark just a little bit better. I don't know. Let's find out. After a quick, crappy wrap job, let's seal and then place in the sous vide container. Now this is my first time doing this, but I know it works. I first heard this method from RXTX Barbecue and Guggen, so shoutouts to both of them for the idea and the tips they gave. Alright, it's the next day, so let's remove it from the sous vide bag and from the butcher paper. Let's give it a drop and see it shake. The bark looks really nice, and I'm also glad it didn't wash off. So let's slice right into it. Now for those curious as to why I like a long rest, well there's many reasons, but mainly because you do get a better, juicier brisket when you do this. And it really takes the stress off any time constraints. The brisket gets done when it's done, and you could hold it for a few hours until it's ready to get served. No more people waiting around asking if the brisket is done, or you serving a subpar brisket because you decided to rush it. Or worse, serving an undercooked brisket that will be tough to eat. But honestly, you cannot argue with the taste.
That is really good.
I think a long rested brisket tastes way better. I've been using a cooler and my oven for long rests, but now that I have a sous vide machine, you know what? I think I'm gonna be using this method instead. So what are your thoughts? Have you ever long rested a brisket before? Is that something that you're even interested in? Please let me know down in the comments, and I'll see you on the next one. Today, we're going to see if this foil boat makes this brisket any better. No, we're not. Get that thing out of here.